Hello, BookTube. I have a wonderful editor who insists on a rather time-honored tradition of sending me a paper checky poo in the mail instead of electronic direct deposit. And my impulse when that happens is always to cavil a bit, to gripe, because of how much problem electronic deposits have been for me in the course of my life. Now, part of that has been that a lot of times those direct deposits have been international, and that causes all sorts of problems. That requires you to know a lot of information about your bank account that people don't ordinarily know if they have to do direct deposit in the United States. But another part of it is just that all of that is just the learning any of those kinds of details about a bank account is so annoying part of my impulse to gripe is just that once a direct deposit is set up, it is so much more convenient. The money just appears. And you don't have to do anything. Whereas with a paper check in the mail, as those of you who are old enough to remember them will know, you have to do a bunch of stuff. Even in the time of pandemic, you have to do a bunch of stuff. It used to be that I didn't so much mind because I'm an outgoing gregarious type, and I got to know the people at my bank, at the particular bank branch that I used during my errands. I had errands that I ran just about every other day when my girls were old and when the world was normal. I had a batch of errands that I did just about every other day. And the bank was always part of that, for one reason or another. When I was always happy to have a reason to go into the bank and whine and complain for help. They got used to it. Because there's so much that I can't do when I'm at the bank. Even a simple deposit slip, I have to have the bank teller make it out for me. They're going to have to make it out for me anyway. I just hand them the blank slip now. I don't even bother. They're not going to be able to read anything that I write. They're going to have to do it all themselves anyway. So I used to not so much mind because I got that treat, but now no bank. There's in the bank that I am a customer. They went from having something like 30 staffed offices in the greater Boston area to having one. There's precisely one staffed office, staffed branch where you can go in and there'll be tellers there. There's precisely one. And the one that I used was not one of them. None of the others made the cut. They're all automated. With all those people gone, all the people who work there, maintenance staff, managerial, tellers, they're all gone. And they have been for a whole year. Really breaks your heart. So, not to start off with a complaint, not that you wouldn't expect that. I didn't get to schmooze and socialize with bank people. But I do still have to deposit the check. That's the whole rigmarole that you have to do. You have to endorse it on the back and then walk it to a machine and overcome your reservations about sticking a check that you just received into a machine. It feels, to my old senses, like it's just like throwing it away. That's not true. These things are very well monitored. And also, in most of the machines that I've used, you have the option when you're asking for your receipt for what you did to have the receipt have an actual printed picture of the check. So you have the ultimate ability to prove that you did what you did. So I shouldn't worry about it. And I had to do it anyway. You just let that thing sit around. That does nobody any good. So I endorsed the thing, put on my clogs, and went off to the nearest bank machine that can take deposits. Not all of them can, and most of the ones that are near me can. So I had to go to the one that could, and there was a silver lining because that bank branch put me within striking distance of a few thrift shops that are still open for business. I don't imagine that that's going to stay true forever. Here in Massachusetts, the numbers are getting so bad for the pandemic that I can't imagine that just ordinary walk-in off the street retail stores are going to be open much longer. Unless, I mean, we have it worse than most countries because those shop owners aren't getting any kind of remuneration from the government or in dribs and drabs. So I took advantage of that fact. I took advantage of the fact that those shops were open and that I had to be in their area anyway. I might not have indulged otherwise, but the OGBG hall wars are ongoing, much to the dismay of well, your TBRs might be howling and they might be casualties. The rest of you seem to love it. Not the TBRs, but the fact that myself and all of my fellow old geezers are still managing to find books. I believe that the hostilities have quieted a bit. I think that Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads and I are the only two combatants who are actually able to go out and about and look for books. But that's what I did today. And I thought, you know, when I was dealing with that check and I was working the machine and all that, I was doing the electronic deposit, I was thinking, just get a couple of books, you know, just for the fun of it. Just go looking for the fun of it. You just got a gigantic number of books yesterday. You don't expect to find everything in the moon. But I found a ton of books. Just a ton of them, and I want to show them to you. And several of them, as you will see, several of them are connected with buddy reads. Here on our little corner of BookTube, buddy reads are so much fun. They're what we do to cement the friendships that we talk so much about on this corner of BookTube. And that they consist of where you and a group of people or one other person who is a special buddy of yours will pick a book or a theme of books or a year's program of books, and you will Voxer about it, reading it in increments over the course of a week or a month or whatever. Voxer being the free walkie-talkie app. That is so much fun. So much fun. I don't know how we communicated in any other way before it came along. And you would think, considering how gregarious I am and how much I love to read and how many different kinds of things I love to read, that I would be the belle of the ball when it comes to buddy reads. But no, nobody wants me in buddy reads because nobody on BookTube likes me because I smell. But that doesn't stop me from engaging in imaginary buddy reads, now does it? And so I have a whole bunch of, like the pathetic loser kid who's on the outskirts of the gymnasium for every high school dance. I have a whole bunch of imaginary buddy reads, all set up for 2021. I'm going to have lots of fun on my imaginary buddy reads. How pathetic is that? And quite a few of these books are going to be part of those imaginary buddy reads, including the first one. I found a mass market paperback of Michael Shower's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Killer Angels. This is a historical novel about the 3.5 or so days of the Battle of Gettysburg. And like I've said many, many, many times, you might hear that and think, oh, historical fiction, no. Oh, military fiction, no. Oh, the Civil War, no. None of that is for me. And in a lot of other circumstances, with a lot of other books, including many books written by this author's son, I would agree with you. I would say, yeah, it largely lives, that subgenre of historical fiction largely lives down to its reputation. It will bore the pants off you. But not this book. Not this book. This book will work on you no matter what you read, no matter when you read, no matter what you've hated in the past. This book will work on you. It is one of the only silver bullet universal translator books that I know of. At least in my own experience. I worked in a bookstore for years and years and years. And I used to tell customers when they would say, I need something that's just going to knock my socks off. And I'm trusting you. You've given me my last 10 great reading experiences. What's number 11? And I would say, here it is. And they'd say, oh, no. And I'd say, if you don't love it, I'll buy it back from you. If you've trusted me for 10 reading experiences, I know your reading taste very well. I'm right about this. And I never had anyone take me up on that. All of them. Every person that I've ever recommended this book to loved it. And I'm going to be reading this as part of an imaginary buddy read with Bill Rutenberg of the Rutenberg Library. He and I have decided, or rather I've decided with an imaginary Bill Rutenberg, because the real Rutenberg won't do a buddy read with me because he hates me, because I smell. But our imaginary buddy read, Bill Rutenberg and I are going to read the novels of the American Civil War, one a month in 2021. To commemorate the fact that it was, 1861 to 2021. We're going to read the signature, the marquee novels of the American Civil War. He's going to suggest a few. I'm going to suggest a few. Some of them will be huge. Some of them will be small. And The Killer Angels is going to be one of them. Along with The Red Badge of Courage, I'm going to suggest Stephen Becker's out-of-print novel, When This War Is Over. We'll probably suffer our way through Andersonville by McKinley Cantor, and we'll go on from there. We might even read one of Jeff Sharer's novels. The son of Michael Shara went on to write a bunch of historical, he's still writing, a bunch of historical fiction, including some set in the American Civil War, that are noticeably, but interestingly, less effective, less successful than his father's one and only book on the American Civil War. So that's an imaginary buddy read that I'll be doing. I'll be doing that imaginary buddy read with Bill Rutenberg. And then the next one is an imaginary buddy read that I'll be doing with Sarah at the Bookish Knitter. This is Fenwick Houses by Catherine Cookson. This great cheesy old mass market paperback that I found. These things were virtually nothing. These things, and Cookson she's a strange figure, a very strange figure. I don't know that I quite understand her. Even now, after all this time dealing with her, reading her, rereading her, selling her, I still don't know quite how to categorize her. Certainly, old style romance novels, that categorization doesn't quite do it. She didn't like that categorization at all. These books, she wrote dozens and dozens, 100 books in her lifetime, and they boiled up out of her. They were not, when you think of an old style romance author who writes slim novels and writes 100 of them, somebody like Barbara Cartland, for instance, you think of someone who just has a sewing pattern and they just go at it mindlessly and produce superhuman amounts of prose by not caring about it much. And Catherine Cookson never wrote a word that was like that. Every word that she wrote came bubbling out of her like magma, no matter how many there were. And they aren't typical of romance novels at all. They are first of all, I believe, far better written, but also in a totally different register than any other kind of romance, so-called romance author. A totally different kind of register. They don't read anything like anything that I believe that if they are romance novels, first of all, that you'd have to stretch the definition of that term beyond recognition to make these things fit. But if they are romance novels, I believe they are pretty much the only romance novels in the entire genre that don't descend from Jane Austen. So we might have convergent evolution going on here. And I don't think I've read Fenwick Houses ever. I'm not claiming to have read all of Catherine Cookson at all. But the imaginary buddy read that I'm going to be doing with Sarah will include not necessarily this book. In our imaginary buddy read, we will be reading authors, but not necessarily the same book, because number one, romance novels tend to be heavily genre fiction, which means they hew to a pattern. Not so much Catherine Cookson, but most of the rest of them hew to a pattern, so that you don't really need to be concentrating on the same book. We'll try when we can. But our buddy read, our imaginary buddy read for 2021, is to look at the forebears of romance. We are not going, until the very end, we are not going to be reading anything modern. We're going to be reading older stuff in 2021. So we will start with The Fawns at Orgo, the beginning of all romance novels, which is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. We will reread that. It'll be a romp of a time, because she's read it, I believe, and I've read it. I've taught it, and I did a read-along on this channel. But we'll move on from there to other templates of romance, including people who've never had read-alongs on BookTube. Catherine Cookson will be one of them. Victoria Holt will be another one. The great Betty Neals, Nurses in Love. These kinds of old Harlequin and Mills and Boon authors who laid the groundwork for the industry as it is today. We'll only get to the big, plush, Bridgerton-style things at the very end of the year of our imaginary read-along, which she's not partaking in real life because she hates me because I smell. And then there's this next one. This is also part of an imaginary buddy read. This is A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. This is the third of the Song of Fire and Ice novels that he was able to finish while he was still alive. I got this. I don't know how well you can make it out. This is gorgeous cover art that the publisher did for the first three of these novels. These big, fat fantasy novels that are so elaborate and multifaceted and whatnot. This lovely cover art, they did it for the first three of these, and then they stopped. They gave the artist his marching papers and just said, we're going to go with boring covers from here on out and see how that goes. I imagine because they were so much cheaper. But one way or another, the imaginary buddy read that I'm doing here is with the guys at Codex Cantina, because if you've watched their channel, you know that they specialize in very short fiction, short stories, novellas, that sort of thing. And they're wonderful at it, wonderful at dissecting those things and picking them apart. But they, in my fantasy, not in reality, because in reality they don't want to do a buddy read with me because they hate me because I smell. But in my fantasy, we thought, wouldn't it be fun if BookTube's best known practitioners of the short form were to engage in a read-along of something enormous, something that has nothing short about it at all, where some of the chapters in these books are as long as the stuff that they read and examine on its own. So I don't have all of these in mass market. I want the first 3 with this cover artwork in mass market. I have the first one, and now I have the third one. I'll get the second one eventually. I have the second one in an ornate deluxe leather-bound illustrated edition. I guess I could use that. I'll have to figure it out soon because these imaginary buddy reads aren't going to wait forever. And this next one, also part of an imaginary buddy read. This is an imaginary buddy read that I'll be doing with Sean the Book Maniac, where he and I, in the course of 21, once a month, are going to read an older and perhaps seminal, no pun intended, gay novel. To look at the forebears of gay fiction, to look at its development over time. So we're going to start very early, pre-Stonewall, and then move on. One book a month. And a lot of these things will be very well known. We'll do Dancer from the Dance, and we'll move on from there. We'll get, as we get closer and closer to the present day as the year goes on, we'll do things like The Line of Beauty, Alan Hollinghurst, things like that, until we get to the present day. But one of the earliest ones that we will be doing, we won't really be doing it because this isn't a real buddy read, because Sean hates me, because I smell. But in my imaginary buddy read, one of the earliest ones that we'll be doing, and it'll be a hoot because I don't think Sean's ever read it, is The Lord Won't Mind by Gordon Merrick. This is a great Triangle Book Club edition. That is their logo. Quality Paperbacks, the Quality Paperback Club did a Triangle Club in their line that was meant to highlight gay and lesbian classics. This is an omnibus with the first 2 Charlie and Peter novels. Sean and I, in my imaginary book club, we are only going to do the first one, The Lord Won't Mind, and then we'll move on to other things. But this is a story of 2 young men who meet and fall into each other's arms. They eventually fall in love. And the book is bursting with a great number of things. But one of the things it's bursting with is enthusiasm, storytelling enthusiasm. And every time I read Gordon Merrick, I am struck afresh at how weird it is that he ever had a career. How weird it is that these books appear. I think The Lord Won't Mind appeared in 1970. Do I have that right? Does it say? I'm pretty sure that I have that right. 1970. The Lord Won't Mind, which is the story of 2 young college-age men exuberantly having sex with each other, appeared in 1970, when that act was illegal in half the country, when most of the Western world considered the mentality behind that act to be not only criminal, but also pathological. That those people were engaging in a disease. And yet, you don't catch any of that in The Lord Won't Mind. It crops up in One for the Gods, when Charlie and Peter start to encounter more of that. They have sort of, for most of The Lord Won't Mind, they're in a kind of idyllic paradise where they're sort of shielded from a lot of that, from what the world thinks of the beautiful thing that they are building between each other. But I'm not 100% sure whether or not Sean has read The Lord Won't Mind. Maybe this will be a first time for him. I haven't been clear on that in the numerous Voxer messages that we've exchanged about our gay buddy read, because we haven't exchanged any Voxer messages about our gay buddy read, because we're not doing a real buddy read of ancestral gay literature, because he hates me, because I smell. But one can dream. Same thing with this next one. This next one is also part of an imaginary buddy read, this time with Britta Bowler. Those of you who have been watching our little corner booktube will know that Britta Bowler is a novelist. She's a writer. She's written nonfiction as well. And she's also was a part of a collaboration that wrote a series of murder mysteries. And she's an avid reader of murder mysteries. And our imaginary buddy read for 2021 can't be a real buddy read, because nobody buddy reads with Steve in real life, because they hate him, because he smells. But the imaginary buddy read that we have is one in which we are going to visit, Britta and I, one book a month. We are going to visit a book in series, because when she was collaborating on her murder mystery, she was writing a book in series. It's a very popular form in murder mysteries where, one adventure after another. You almost never find people writing standalone murder mysteries. And the question at the back of our imaginary buddy read is going to be how well, it's a question that customers in bookstores ask all the time, how well do books that aren't the first in the series hold up as books on their own? How well do they do that? So if we plunk down on some murder mystery series that's been going on for 12 books, and we plunk down on book number 8, how well is it going to work as a book? And maybe I've read the series and she hasn't, maybe she hasn't, I haven't. We'll put our notes together and figure out how well the book succeeds, just as a book, without the support of the rest of the series. That's going to be our imaginary buddy read, and I'm delighted to say that one of the series that we will be doing is the Bernie Gunther novels by the late Philip Kerr. This is Prussian Blue, one of my favorite Bernie Gunther novels, where Hitler. These are stories about one good man in Nazi Germany who's a police officer and who in the back of his mind says, my bosses are monsters, my country is ruled by monsters, the world is in flames, but if someone has murdered someone else, I'm going to track them down. I can't help myself. It's just the right thing to do. It's my duty. And I'm not going to care about the rest of it until the rest of it interferes with me. But first, I'm just going to care about right and wrong. And in this series, Hitler is due at his Alpine retreat at the Eagle's Nest. He's due for a visit. And right before he's due to visit, a week before, someone is found dead at that resort. And the Nazi higher-ups want Bernie Gunther to find out, you have a week to figure this out, and especially to determine whether or not the Fuhrer is in any danger when he gets here, or whether or not he needs to cancel his trip. And if you don't find out, or if you think you find out and you're wrong and something wrong happens, of course, you will die. I just think this novel brings together so much of what makes that whole series work. I'm not 100% sure this is the novel that we will use, because I know it fairly well, and that might ruin the experience. But there are so many murder mysteries out there that we're not going to need to worry. We'll find plenty. Not that we actually will find plenty, because the read-along isn't real. The buddy read isn't real. I wish it were. I wish people would buddy read with me and do Zoom calls with me and Voxer with me, but they don't. Ooh. But anyway, there are plenty more books. So I'm just trying to figure out the feng shui here of how I do them. Like another one that I found is another gay fiction, another piece of gay fiction that I've never read, even though I'm pretty sure this probably falls within my reading time, the time when I was reviewing. Yeah, 2012. I don't think I ever read this. I'm terrible with names and with titles, so maybe I need to read into it to remember it. But it's this. It's Don't Let Me Go by J.H. Trumbull. And some people spend their whole lives looking for the right partner. Nate Shaper found his in high school. In the 8 months since their cautious flirting became a real, heart-pounding, tell-the-parents relationship, Nate and Adam have been inseparable. But even when local kids take their homophobia to brutal levels, Nate is undaunted. He and Adam are rock solid, two parts of a whole, yin and yang. But when Adam graduates and takes an off-Broadway job in New York, at Nate's insistence, that certainly begins to flicker. Nate's friends can't keep his insecurities at bay, especially when he catches Skype glimpses of Adam's shirtless roommate. Nate starts a blog to vent his frustrations and becomes the center of a school controversy, drawing ire and support in equal amounts. But it's the attention of a new boy who is looking for more than guidance that forces him to confront who and what he really is. So it sounds like this could be a novel about not so much finding your perfect partner as what happens in real life when that passionate, elemental kind of it can do no wrong friendship simply ages out, simply transforms over time into something else, where nobody's at fault. We'll see if this author is trusting enough in the intelligence of his readers to make sure that nobody is at fault. I'll probably read this tonight, find out, because I don't recall it. This next one is classic science fiction. I had to grab this because the thrift shop where I found it, to put it mildly, doesn't have anything like this. I'm not sure that it will be much good. But this is Philip Jose Farmer. And this is classics of modern science fiction. Just a slim volume of Philip Jose Farmer short stories. This author is best known for his Riverworld books, but he also wrote a couple of nonfiction works, one about Doc Savage and one about Tarzan that I just love. I just love those books. I'm not wild about the Riverworld books. I guess if I should try them again. They never really blew me away. Of all of the big marquee science fiction series that I've read, they are one of my least favorites, and I'm not 100% sure that that is a lasting judgment. I'm not 100% sure that would be true if I went back to them again. So I should probably keep my eye out for the Riverworld series. But in the meantime, this has short story. It's a collection of short stories. There are a few that I haven't read. There are a few that I have read. The Alley Man is in here, and I've read that. That's a great story on a science fiction template about humans and Neanderthals living together. But there are a couple in here that I haven't read, and I'm hoping that they don't really harp on this author's hobby horse. This author has a hang-up with sex in a way that really gets in the way of his science fiction. God, some of his Tarzan pastiche stuff is just anyway, maybe that's it. Maybe he just offends some mitochondrial puritanism of mine, one way or another. It's certainly a case of needing to give him another go, and this was fate putting him in my path, because no matter where I was, I would have noticed a volume like this, but in the place where I found it, just unheard of. So I had to grab it, especially since these were all, like I mentioned, dirt cheap. The next one is something I've read before, due for a reread. This could also be part of an imaginary buddy read, maybe with somebody who's a big baseball fan. But this is Chad Harbach's debut novel, The Art of Fielding, which I really, really liked it. I thought it was really, really good. Also, the more I look back on it, the funnier it seems to me. There's lots of not only tossed-off humor, but structural humor in here that I didn't really appreciate the first time, because there are some tragedies, slow-burning tragedies at the heart of this book that I think grabbed most of my attention. The foremost of which being, this is a baseball novel, as you might be able to tell from the lettering here, and there's a kid who is a wonder on the mound as a pitcher, just amazing as a pitcher. And at one point, at the beginning of this novel, after we've met the main characters and got to know them a little, so that we're a little bit invested in them, at one point early in the novel, that pitcher snaps up a ground ball, pivots to throw home, and the pitch goes wild, and it's 90 miles an hour. It goes into the dugout at 90 miles an hour, and seriously, it does serious damage. And the damage that it does in that dugout spiderwebs out to affect all 5 of the main characters in this book. That moment does. Now, there are plenty of other moments like that in this book, but I haven't read it. I haven't reread it in a while, and I kind of want to, because it was a phenom novel. Chad Harbach got, I don't know, $780 trillion for it, or something like that. And has been conspicuously silent since. He did a tiny little thing of throwaway, one-page nonfiction. But other than that, nothing. And I've often thought, I don't remember the exact amount of money that he got for this, but it was, even before the film rights or translation deals or anything like that, it was vast, just mind-staggeringly vast, life-alteringly vast. And large amounts of money like that, I hate them, I detest them. They are absolute death. They're an arrow in the heart of the publishing industry. If you are going to jump on a bandwagon, lose your mind in speculative outbidding, like on the floor at Wall Street, over some debut novel, so that you end up pauperizing your house in order to pay this author $10 million. That's 10 other authors that you aren't going to buy, and that the public is not going to see from your house with your publicity and engine behind them. I don't agree with it at all, especially since it raises the expectations on a novel just mercilessly, and it does one other thing that I always try to keep track of with books like this, and that is that it separates the writers from the grifters. If you are beetling away, writing down your friends' best jokes, writing down monologues conducted by you and your friends on back porches while you're all stoned, taking, time here and there, loving the pretension of calling yourself an author the whole time, on the gamble that the right people can pull the right strings, can get a bidding war started, and then make enough money to set you up for the rest of your life. If you know that, if that's the reason why you write your book, then the publishing world will never hear from you again. Or the second book, when the pool payments are starting to get a little harder, will have nothing in it. It'll be dead. It'll be a dead book. It'll be prose from someone who has no reason to write, no business writing. And I'm curious now if that will be true with Chad Harbach. I'm always, whenever some new phenom novel earns the earth and everything in it, there was one a couple of years ago that earned enough money to set the author up for the rest of his life. Now, if that happens, you no longer, if you're a grifter, you no longer have any reason to write. If you're not a grifter, if writing is something you can't help but do, well, then won't that show? I mean, this is, The Art of Fielding was from 2011. That's 10 years ago. That's 10 Chad Harbach novels that have not appeared. One way or another, that doesn't stop the book from being good, so I'm going to give it a re-go. And then this next one was maybe the find of the day, one of the finds of the day, because I have a ratty trade paperback of this thing that I found in a little free library when the pandemic started. My old copy had fallen apart. I needed a new one, and there it was. But it's a little too ratty, and I put it on the shelf in my biography section, but I kept thinking, as soon as you find a hardcover, you should swap it out. And I did today. It's this. It's all on fire. This is Henry Meyer's biography of William Lloyd Garrison, the great abolitionist, the foe of slavery. And also a great big book about his time and the abolitionist movement just in general in America. And this was just terrific to find because I can just pull that. The trade paperback that I have of this is so ratty that I am free from responsibility. That's probably why it was put in a little free library in the first place. I'm free of responsibility. No one would ever want the copy that I have, so I can just throw it away. It's not in a good enough shape to give away. It's not in a good enough shape to sell to the Brattle or anything like that. It's a relief because I can just swap this for it and get rid of the other one. And that's what I intend to do, probably with a bit of rereading first. This next one is something we've seen before, but I believe this is an anthology of separate volumes, and I had to have it. I've made no secret of the fact on this channel that I love New Yorker cartoons. I think they're fantastic. I have many, many anthologies of them in this bookcase right behind me that go back, 100 years, and I never tire of looking at them and laughing at them. But the New Yorker has its standards. They don't take just anything. And even their in-house artists, the people who have steady contracts to do work with them, will sometimes do cartoons that they just can't use. For one reason or another, they just can't use them. Usually because the thing is totally inappropriate for the New Yorker's upscale but general audience. And somebody had the inspired idea to collect some of those things into a thing called the Rejection Collection. And this is an anthology, the best of the Rejection Collection, that has a whole bunch. It's much bigger than either one of them. I want to show you some of these, but most of them I can't show to you because they're just not suitable. I want to show you this one. It isn't suitable either, but not on the surface. This is by Harry Bliss. And I don't know if you're going to be able to read the caption. The caption is, "I have an enormous favor to ask of you." That is the cartoon. I have an enormous favor to ask you. And you look at that, and because you don't have your mind in the gutter, you immediately think, oh, one dog wants the other dog to take his cone off. And you can certainly read it that way, but there's another thing that dogs like to do that this dog with a cone can't do. I just love it. I love how it just unfolds in your mind. And there's another one. Now, you should prepare yourself because this is pretty dark. This is the caption on this one. This is by Pat Burns. And the caption is, "It'd be so sad if he wasn't so damn cute." And that is the picture. It's a tiny little Grim Reaper. And it's the pediatrics ward. It's the pediatrics ward. It's a little Grim Reaper for little babies. No wonder the New Yorker rejected it. And again, like with the dog cartoon, it unfolds on you. You don't see that sign at first. You just see the ridiculous figure here. You don't get the darker humor until you've studied it a bit. I was looking at this thing on the couch, when I got back, and I was just hooting with laughter, just hooting. And then the last two things that I got, this is another hideously long video. The last two things I got were graphic novels. I never find graphic novels used secondhand, never. And this was Volume 1 and Volume 2 in perfect condition, so I grabbed them. This is, the artist is John Cassaday, and the writer is Joss Whedon. And Joss Whedon has a lot of problems as a writer. He is, of course, the renovator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He was the creative genius behind Angel and Firefly. And those of you who have been fans of those shows will know his strengths. He has strengths, and his strengths are very strong. Very, very strong. When his humor is on, for instance, his humor is great. His instinct for pathos, for drama, is a little bit kitschy. It's a little bit old world, but it is still remarkably effective. Just remarkably effective. He has weaknesses too. He's prone to kind of sophomoric locker room humor. And he also has a thing for, there's one particular kind of tormented female character that he just can't let go of. He just can't let go of it. Everything that he writes has something like that. And if the template that he's using, if he's using somebody else's template, and it doesn't have that kind of a tormented and basically sacrificial everyman woman, young woman, at the middle of the story, if it doesn't have that, he'll add that. And this is, he was given a run on X-Men, The Astonishing X-Men. And that's Cassaday's artwork. I'm not a huge fan of this artist, but he does great work in this series, just great work. I'm also not a huge fan of what the X-Men had become around this time. We have the concept of secondary mutations, where a mutant, which is why the Beast, Hank McCoy, in addition to being big and blue and furry, he now looks like a giant kitty cat, and we're just told blatantly, just blandly, it's a secondary mutation. He's continuing to mutate in real time, in real life. He's continuing to mutate, but also just the general basics here. That Jean Grey should not be dead. Jean Grey, Scott Summers, and Professor X are the heart of the X-Men, as Chris Claremont wrote 50 years ago. And that should still be true. Instead, we have Emma Frost, the White Queen. Anyway, the Joss Whedon style ingenue female character who comes into the story here is Kitty Pryde. And it is one big story in the course of this volume, and I also got the second volume with this gorgeous poster cover. Look at that. That is incredible. There is actually one big story that unfolds in the course of these issues. It was a little bit too slow a story for my liking, issue by issue. Look at that. Just incredible. Incredible artwork. Just amazing. But there are some incredible dramatic beats that happen in this storyline, including one is the return of a character who we have thought was dead, whose return is done in such a perfectly cinematic way that I am sure in that instance that for those 10 panels, Joss Whedon didn't just write up the description for Cassaday, but actually showed him, this is what I want it to look like. I'm sure that happened. It's so directorial, that sequence where that beloved character returns to life, that it had to have been Whedon who was in control of it. And the ending. There's a massive, tragic, heroic ending here. Again, will be very familiar to fans of Buffy, the season where she apparently leaps to her death. The ending of Angel. There's an ending to this story that is very much in the Whedon line. I think it works spectacularly well. And the minute I saw these things, I realized I didn't have them. That I just, for one reason or another, I think I had a big volume and got rid of it because it was unwieldy. I had individual issues. I got rid of them, or my surly houseboy took them, one way or another. I realized as soon as I saw these volumes that I didn't have them, so now I do, and I'll give them a reread. So there you go. That is my my thrift shop haul for this Tuesday. A nice big mixed bag of things. Half of which are for imaginary book groups, imaginary buddy reads. The BookTube isn't doing with me because they don't like me. They like each other, but they don't like me. But I can dream. Anyway, this video has gone on quite long enough, so I'm going to wrap it up and try to upload it. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.